you can see how windy it is, and I say, like, I can't go forward, but, like, it's the only way I can go. And that day really ruined me. I pulled over on the side of the road for probably an hour because I was so destroyed. My body was hurting, my Achilles was bad, and I had full intention of hitchhiking to the next town just to have a break. And luckily for me, there was no one there. No one would pick me up. I don't know, it just made me think, like, just get back on the bike. You can keep pushing. But that day really broke me pretty bad.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host, Bella Malloy, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Jack Keogh. I first came across Jack when I was scrolling through YouTube, and his incredible documentary titled The Hardest Race on Earth, a Tour Divide film, popped up as a suggestion, and I was immediately captivated watching it. Not just by the incredible scenery and amazing vistas which can be found on the Great Divide mountain route, but also by Jack himself, who was actually filming his entire experience while racing in the 2023 edition of the Tour Divide race. The highs and the lows of racing in an off-road ultra race laid bare for us all to see. From epic drone shots of dreamy, sweeping landscapes to dealing with navigating through the infamous peanut butter mud on a torturous day in the basin. He rode so many climbs, descended so many descents, riding through constant rain showers, pushing deep to get ahead of those looming thunderstorms which seem to be ever present. Then, of course, there's the constant doubts which often come up racing this way. Is he going to be able to continue on when an Achilles injury flared up, seemingly putting getting to the finish line a very uncertain possibility? Watching all the ups and downs and raw emotion on display, I knew Jack was someone I would need to speak with. His story one I really wanted to be able to share. I can't wait to dig into the details of Jack's race, but also to learn so much more about his passion for adventure, the outdoors, which he's capturing so beautifully in his films. Jack Keogh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Make me sound like a superhero.
I'm a super fan. And can I just have a shout out as well? Listeners to the show, you know I'm a proud Aussie, and how proud am I to be speaking to an Aussie who lives so close to my Australian backyard. Jack, yay! Fly the flag for our area. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pumped. I'm looking forward to digging into your story for sure, because I know that you're going to have so many adventures to share with us. But Jack, a question which I start the show with, and I like to ask this of all my guests is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I don't remember the bike, but I have a memory of me like riding the bike. So, fun story, I was actually born at home.
Wow.
I didn't make it to the hospital, but at that house, I was there until I was about 2. And my first memory on a bike was on my little back veranda, like one of those push bikes with no pedals, just rolling around. And then from there, bikes were kind of erased from my mind until I was about 15 when I sort of dabbled in BMX.
I've got so many questions here. First of all, as an Aussie, I love hearing the word veranda. It's such a quintessential scene. I can just picture what your place is like there, because you grew up on a farm as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so I lived in town for 2 years, and then pretty much since then I've been out on the farm. I lived in Sydney for a few years too there, but yeah, majority of my life has been on the same farm.
Awesome. So when you're cutting tricks on your BMX then, is that on trails built on your farm? Like, did you have your own jumps and stuff like that?
Yeah, so my older brother was actually who got me into BMX a bit. I just dabbled in it, full disclaimer. But yeah, we had some tracks here. Yeah, like I could see them from my bedroom.
Do you ever do it now? Like, do you still bring the BMX out of the cupboard or something like that? Like, do you own a BMX?
I don't even know where that bike went. I don't know when I got rid of it. Yeah. From then I probably didn't ride bikes until I got into gravel riding, which was, 2018, maybe just prior to that.
We've just cracked into 2024. It's funny. It's thinking it's only 6 years ago. It is a very recent thing for you. But I also feel someone who grows up on a property in Australia, and it's definitely something that's in common that's shared with friends of mine who've grown up on property, is the outdoors is what fills them up. They have a passion for the outdoors. When you're in a city, you might love the city atmosphere and the city lights and the hustle and the bustle that might go out with that and the nightlife, but really your happy place is outside. Would that be correct for you as well, Jack?
Oh, definitely. Growing up, it was almost reversed because on the weekends, all my friends would be hanging out in town and all that sort of stuff. And I did join sometimes when my parents could take me in. But as I've got older, I've just appreciated more and more and more sort of where I live and being a bit out of the hustle and bustle. Living in Sydney for a few years. I did live in Cronulla, so it was out of the mess, which was nice.
Beautiful surf beach.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But even then I was, I just always thought about the farm and coming back to quiet life.
How big is the property? What sort of size are we talking about here?
I think it's around 500 acres, but it sort of backs onto a national park. So I can't see any of my neighbours. It backs onto a national park, which is excellent riding, by the way.
I'm just thinking, is that an Imagine National Park?
No, it's called Rob Roy National Park. It's like just it's like a long strip that I guess runs from where I live into town. And it's all really nice fire roads, super steep climbing. So it's an unreal training route, but yeah, it's nice to have it right there.
Oh my gosh. And when we say super steep climbing and unreal training route, I'm just thinking perfect practicing and training grounds for the Tour de Fied. We'd be remiss to think that the Tour de Fied's the first race you've ever been in. And maybe race is the wrong word, but the Hunt 1000, which I always like to look at the local race here, especially Canberra or something, and I'm thinking of Australia or back home, and it traverses the Australian high country. You're nearly almost on that route, really. Like your place would come quite close to the Hunt 1000 route, right?
Yeah, very close. This year, the route got rerouted and it was like literally on my doorstep, the finish, which is kind of cool. But yeah, the Hunt 1000 is actually, funnily enough, what got me into bikepacking. I knew about the Hunt before I knew about bikepacking. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So how did that happen there then? And I guess for my listeners, Hunt 1000, it's roughly 1,000 kilometres. It used to go from Canberra to Melbourne. I think recently they've switched the route around, which actually threw me this year because I was expecting riders to take off from Canberra. Everyone would get together in this street called Lonsdale Street. There's a pizzeria there. We'd all have pizzas and then they'd go. And then I was like, hang on, it's leaving from Melbourne. What's going on here? But it's 1,000 kilometres and it traverses the Australian high country. How did you find out about this race if you're not into the bikepacking world?
Yeah, so my best mate who I ride with, Rowan, he sort of was like, oh, I'm getting into this bikepacking thing. There's this ride I found called the Hunt 1000. He was talking to me about it and I was like, oh, that's pretty crazy. And then within sort of a few weeks, he had gotten a bike, a Surly Straggler.
Oh, Surly!
Yeah.
A soft spot for Surly on the show. My husband's got a straggler.
Yeah,
I should have, but I last minute decided no to a straggler and I always regret that decision. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so he got a Surly. I was still just trying to save up for a bike at the time. So we'd go into like local state forests. He would ride his bike in and I would hike in and we would meet at the same spot. That went on for a few weeks and then I eventually ordered a Surly myself. I got a disc trucker. So that was my first bike. Completely unaware of what's good in riding, or I just knew Surly was like this cool brand and I was like, yeah, I want one of them. Got myself a Surly and then my first ride was from Canberra to the south coast, which is about 120 kilometres. I had no idea what I was in for. I think it took us 3 days. But that was a very hard 3 days. Like I was destroyed. I remember thinking like, what have I done? What am I doing? And funnily enough, on that ride, there's a place about halfway, like a small country town called Araluen. And we stopped in at the pub there for lunch. And there was an older couple and we got chatting to them and they were like, oh yeah, our son's sort of into this stuff. He runs some events and that. And we were like, oh yeah, cool. And like, what's your son's name? And they were like, Dan Hunt. And we were like, that's crazy because that's the reason we're sort of here right now.
Wow. That's like a serendipitous moment. Like, wow, you're actually with people whose son actually runs the race.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's a really weird moment.
Absolutely. I want to actually dig into the details quickly of that first trip to the South Coast. Absolutely broke you. Did you have some wild weather or was it just the terrain?
Just the terrain. And I think from not riding at all, like anyone that's ridden bikes long distances would know like saddle sores are a thing and sort of learn over time to navigate that. Whereas for me, it wasn't even a consideration. I didn't know they existed or anything. So that was a really hard aspect. Just the legs were dead. It's not exactly a flat route. It's not crazy either, but there's a bit in it. And for a first timer with dry bags strapped to my seat and a basket on the front with like a cooler box in there with my stuff, it wasn't the lightest setup.
Do you have photos of this first trip?
Yeah. I got plenty of photos.
Send me a pic, man.
Yeah, well.
It's actually something that's really cool is when you follow someone who's in the sport is actually seeing them as well as yourself if you're in it sort of evolve with how your kit sort of evolves with every iteration of stuff that you do, the lessons that you've learned and what you change up. I just love this view of this disc trucker with a basket on the front and a cooler bag.
Yeah, I definitely packed a bit bougier than I do now.
So that trip to the South Coast, it broke you, but obviously not enough to not want to get you to want to do and get into this sport a bit more and dig into the hunt because it's no tour divide, but I would not call that an easy route either. That's some pretty steep country that you're traversing there in the Australian high country.
After that, I guess I just kept chipping away at things, kept doing more rides. And it wasn't until I did that same ride again to the South Coast and it was like exceptionally easier. Still like a hard challenge being new, but I was like, oh my God, I'm actually feeling improvement. Like it's like I thought, oh, maybe that's what riding is all the time. And I remember riding past these guys on that first trip. I mean, they rode past me and we got chatting and they had no camping gear. And I was like, oh, like, where are you guys going? They're like, oh, just the coast today. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, they're doing this in one day. So that kind of gave me hope. And yeah, when I did it again, it was easier. And then I probably did it again. It was easier again. And then eventually November came around, which is when the hunt usually was. And it got cancelled that year. But me and my mate Rowan had made plans already. This was COVID year. So we were like, all right, well, let's just do it anyway. The borders were closed. You could go into Victoria, but you couldn't come out if you went in. But it was expected to open by the time we'd finished. So we were just banking on things going all right. And we just set off, chugged away at it. I think it took us 11 days the first time, which we were stoked on. We were like, I can't believe we just did that.
I'd be stoked with 11 days on the hunt.
Yeah. I think, honestly, the hunt is an incredibly hard ride. It's different to the Tour Divide in the distance. But if the Hunt 1000 was as long as the Tour Divide, it would be not double the amount of elevation, but not too far off. It's an extremely steep route.
Yeah, it's really, really climby. Yeah. And the climbs on it, oh, they're leg breakers too.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are body breakers because there is no cycling up some of these climbs.
Yeah.
It's like, do you go through Valentine's Hut on the hunt? Up to Valentine's?
Yeah. Pretty much every route that I've done on the hunt does. This year I got rerouted just because it was flooding. But yeah, always through Valentine's.
There's some amazing huts, and to my listeners, I have a soft spot for this area. It's where, when I was in Australia living there, our house was in the Snowy Mountains, not far from parts of where the hunt route goes. And that area is dotted with beautiful huts right throughout. Sadly, some of them have been lost due to recent bushfire devastation, although they are being rebuilt now. And the Hunt 1000 event aside, there's some phenomenal riding to do there through the Australian high country, and you can often use these as places that, you know, you can plan routes where you incorporate some of these huts into a multi-day route. And generally you don't sleep in them unless it's really bad weather. It's normally actually a bit nicer in your tent than a rat-infested hut sometimes. But it's always a good spot. You know that you've got shelter from the bad weather if you're there as well. Did you need to reside in some of these huts on the route as well then and have a little bit of a campfire and get warm?
Yeah, so I've done the hunt 3 times now. I would say 2 times as like a rookie beginner, and then 1 time only about 6 weeks ago, and I feel like I knew a bit more. But the first 2 times, definitely sometimes these huts were like a northern star at the end of the day, just knowing you could dry off. First time I did it, weather was fine. Second time I did it was rain and snow majority of the way. So the huts were, a godsend, especially in Jagungal. Like, they're just so beautiful. I find the closer you get to Melbourne, the worse the huts get, or the better access to them, the worse they get. So I think that's why Jagungal's so beautiful.
Hi everyone, it's Bella here from the show. Just a shout out to all my new listeners out there. Thanks for tuning in. You may not be aware that the show has recently just turned 1. If you're enjoying this episode, the chances are you're probably going to enjoy a few that are in our back catalogue as well, so make sure to take the time to check them out. Seek Travel Ride is a passion project of mine, and I do all the work on the show myself, from researching my guests, conducting the interviews, to putting the audio edits together and releasing the episodes. If you've been enjoying the journey so far, there's a few ways that you can actually help support the show. The first is to hit the link to buy me a coffee in the show notes. That helps the show out financially. But there's some other ways as well, and it's as simple as sharing the show with your family and friends, sharing it on your social media. That really helps get the show out there to a wider audience. The other thing is to make sure that you are following the show in your podcast player app, because that notifies you when all these new episodes drop as well. Once again, I thank you so much for your support to date. Now let's get back to that episode. You earn your time at the huts in Jagungal, and Jagungal was where my very first bikepacking ride was, to Happy's hut in the Jagungal wilderness, which sadly burnt down in the 2019-2020 bushfires. But I do know it's been earmarked to be rebuilt, so I'm looking forward to going back there. But I remember getting to that hut the week before. My first thought was, I can't wait to go bikepacking, but I'd never go there first time. And sure enough, less than a week later, saddlebags were on, and that's where we went.
Yeah, right.
So
Perfect.
just get into it sometimes. Just let yourself be uncomfortable with the hard stuff, because that's where the magic happens, I feel. Are you a bit the same?
Oh, definitely. I feel like most things I do, I feel like I'm a bit over my head. Yeah, there's so many moments from when I first started to even now where I'm like, it's almost like, I call it like looking at myself from third person, and I think it's a strength and a weakness, but I just think like, what am I doing? But I've never looked back on an adventure or a memory like that and had a bad thought. Like, it's always like, oh, that was awesome. Even if it was like a really bad situation, I look back and I think I'm glad I did that. Like, I got through that.
It's interesting though, Jack, and I'm certainly looking forward to digging into the details of your Tour Divide experience, which, to my listeners, I gave a shout out to Jack's amazing documentary film there on YouTube. You definitely want to be watching that after this. But there was something actually, Jack, when I was watching that film, you were in the basin, it was peanut butter mud day, and I think you'd hiked 4 kilometres, and you were like, I got to get through this. It's 100 Ks. I could be pushing for 100 Ks. And it was almost like you had the foresight at that moment to know that things were going to be really crappy and tough that day, but you were still happy at that moment.
Yeah, I remember it vividly.
Yeah, I bet you do. I spoke about this actually very recently with Jack Greenwood, a fellow guest of the show who just finished a ride up through South America. And we were talking about there's something about doing adventures in this manner, especially adventures where it's a lot of hard stuff. You're just perpetually always in the moment, which means that you recall things almost pin sharp when they come back as memories. Do you find that with your outdoor experiences?
Yeah, I think so for sure. Like, I haven't often thought about it like that, but I can very much recall, I can recall exact experiences or moments or views or like how my bike looked or things like that. I picture certain gas stations because, like, there's, for example, there's one on the Tour Divide early on where I got there really late at night, and there was the hot food sort of area where they'd usually have pie, sausage rolls. I seen a little tag for hash browns, and I was like, oh my God, I could go some hash browns. So I said to the guy, is there going to be hash browns in the morning? I'm going to be leaving at 5 a.m. And he said, I'll make sure I've got you some hash browns. And I went back there at 5 o'clock, and the guy had completely forgotten. And like that, I picture that like,
no,
frame of where they were meant to be so vividly right now.
Oh my goodness, my heart sinks. We share a love of hash browns, Jack. But yeah, recounting pin sharp moments, and I imagine there's going to be like vistas that will remind you, but also smells as well, because you can't be as involved in the outdoors without those sort of memory triggers happening too. In fact, it would be remiss to do a podcast episode with you, Jack, and not talk about some of your other non-bike related outdoor adventures. You are a through hiker. You can proudly say you've hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. That's massive.
Yeah, it was a pretty good time. I'd say probably highlight of my life, to be honest. PCT.
And you've got a film of that as well, which definitely check it out. Actually, while we're talking about your films, give a shout out quickly to your YouTube channel.
So my YouTube channel is just my full name, Jack Keogh. I don't have a lot on there, but I've got a lot more on the way, and hopefully in the next few years that'll continue to grow.
I will definitely put a link in the show notes to you all there. I'm sure you're intrigued to see it because I've talked up your Tour Divide film, which is amazing. I said to Jack before we press record, I think this needs to go to film festivals. It's that higher quality. But your Pacific Crest Trail film, I watched your Tour Divide film and then went down the rabbit hole. What else does this guy have? And then I saw Pacific Crest Trail. I knew it from previous guests who have through hiked and have done that trail. And I knew this is a monumental achievement. That film goes hand in hand with your Tour Divide film. It's amazing viewing as well. What spurred on the idea for through hiking? And have you always been a hiker?
Oh, good question. So biking kind of led me to through hiking, funnily enough. So when I first started biking, like very early on, there's a girl in Canberra, Tyler, who organizes these rides for like beginners or like new people that are trying to get into bikepacking. It's called Canberra Campout. So I went along to that. It's like,
Go Tyler.
yeah, she's unreal. There was maybe, let's say 30 people there, and it's just over one night. You do 30 Ks roughly the first day. Everyone camps 30 Ks back. And there was a guy there, and I overheard him talking to some other people, and he'd just gotten back from the Pacific Crest. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Looked into it later on, and I was like, damn, that's a pretty big adventure. That's unreal. But it didn't really cross my mind to do it or anything then. It kind of laid in the back for a while. And then, yeah, during like COVID and that, I guess I looked into it more, and there's a few people on YouTube that have made unreal films on it. And then, yeah, it just got to the point where I was like, oh, screw it. I'm going to do that.
I'm trying to recount the exact distance. I can't off the top of my head. I know that it's pretty big.
It's almost exactly the same as the Tour Divide. That's about 4,250 kilometers, I think.
I was thinking 4,000, 4,500 or something like that. Actually, a previous guest, it was Simon Willis. He hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, and he was telling me about it. I'd heard of through hikes, but I'd never understood how it actually all works. It was totally foreign to me that it's such a long hike that you'd need to buy new shoes along the way. Like, yeah. I think you went through 4 sets of shoes. There's similar elements to bikepacking, but it's sort of taking it down a notch in terms of slow travel, though, isn't it? Like, it is really slowing it down.
Yeah, it's like, I think the good thing about through hiking is because it's so long, it's not very common that you meet someone that's done through hikes before. It almost feels like it's everyone's first time. So everyone's kind of learning all this stuff along the way. You're like picking up things off other people and vice versa. Yeah, I went through 4 pairs of shoes, which was on the low end. Like my shoes, I got a lot of use out of. Some people send like resupply packages to themselves along the whole way. Like before they go, they'll have 50 boxes at home, like full of food that they'll send to where they expect to be on certain days. I didn't really do that. I almost went the whole thing with no boxes, but in Washington, it gets a bit scarce. So I did, but I could have got by without, like, in hindsight now. But yeah, like through hiking just feels like it's all new. You're just learning stuff every day. And I think that's what makes it exciting. I kind of like the pace of it. Like we were moving quite fast at the start, maybe 30 kilometers a day. And then towards the end, 50 to 60 kilometers a day. And it never felt hard because, yeah, you don't really notice it happen. You just kind of get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, and it's not flat terrain. It's hugely mountainous.
Not at all. And it's interesting because It was something that I thought about when I was knowing that I was going to interview you, knowing you'd done the Pacific Crest Trail, knowing that you'd done the, Tour Divide, the Great Divide mountain bike route. And actually, in a way, the Pacific Crest Trail, you went south to north. Tour Divide, you go north to south. They're almost the same length, but they're in different scenery. So you have such a different view of it all there as well. But they're huge days. And if I recall, I think a lot of people mark off, 5-6 months to do this. I think you did it in was it just over 4 months?
It was 4 months to the day. But full disclaimer, we had beautiful weather. In the span of 4 months, I would estimate maybe 10 hours total of rain.
Wow.
We had a great snow year in the Sierras.
I'm just thinking there, Jack, sorry, just quickly. You would nearly have had 10 hours of rain on the first day of the Tour Divide.
Oh, probably at least. I don't think
That's just the first day.
Yeah. Yeah, it was different.
Yeah. And did you have a trail name they get given to you?
So trail names are an interesting concept in thru hiking. So I think the idea of it is like back home or wherever you're from, you're kind of this person that you might have to be or people expect of you. But thru hiking is often a very solo thing in terms of most people start on their own. It's probably hard to convince someone else to walk for 5 months with you. So the idea of a trail name is you can kind of like reinvent yourself or just be whoever you want. There was a few trail names thrown my way, but they were all a bit, I don't know, they were softballs. So I kind of let them go. But yeah, trail names are cool. Before I started, I was like, oh, this is a bit cheesy. But it makes so much sense when you're there, even from a sense of remembering people. Like, I might meet 10 people named Matt, and that's kind of hard to remember. But if you meet someone named like I've got one of my friends, Yoshi, that was his name, because he had this green backpack. He looked like the character Yoshi. He'd have his little green hood on all the time. And yeah, it just makes it so much easier to remember people. And yeah, I guess it's just a bit of fun.
That's a really good way of looking at it. And I've wondered, like, trail names, does it go both ways? Can you choose it or does it get chosen for you sometimes?
It's meant to be chosen for you. There's some that you could tell people have kind of thought of one beforehand and they've kind of chosen their own. But yeah, the idea is it's kind of meant to be given to you and you can accept or not.
Oh, wow. So you denied your trail names. Can I ask, I don't want to move on from this theme of thru hiking just yet, but do you see thru hiking as something that you will do again? Do you have it in your mind to do another thru hike?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thru hiking to me was such a great experience. I think about it, the Pacific Crest, every single day of my life, without a doubt. Like I've even been thinking this year, like, how could I do it again? But the problem with thru hiking as opposed to bikepacking, it depends what route you do on bikepacking, but to do a thru hike, it's like 5 months out of your life.
It's a massive commitment.
Yeah, it's more the time constraint. It's not the challenge that turns me off at all. Like I would kill to be out there, and I don't really have a bad memory of it. But yeah, if somehow I could put the rest of my life on pause and not age and not my responsibilities, I can hold tight for 5 months. I would, however long I could, I would thru hike continuously, I think.
What would you thru hike? What trails are coming to your mind there?
Well, the Pacific Crest, I really want to do again, just because it was such a great experience. And like for those that aren't familiar with thru hiking, the Pacific Crest is kind of like the Tour Divide of hiking. Like it's the big one, the one that everyone knows. It's like just the perfect recipe for a good time. Like towns line up really well, scenery is beautiful, all those sort of things. But there's also the CDT, which is the Continental Divide, which the Tour Divide actually weaves in and out of because they're following the same range. The TA in New Zealand is another one that's pretty high on the list, which is also a bikepacking route.
Yeah.
They're probably the main three, but yeah, the PCT I think will always have a special place in my heart, and people that have done it multiple times, or I've got friends that have done a lot of thru hikes, they always say, yeah, PCT is just special.
This almost sounds silly for me to ask as a question because it's a trail. It should be possible, but would it be something you would do in the other direction? You went south to north. Do people hike it north to south, or is it always south to north?
Yeah, so a lot of people do hike it the opposite way. It's mainly a northbound hike. So with that, there's, I guess, a lot of benefits. There's a lot more people, so there's like more of a community. Whereas, yeah, fewer people, it might be harder to meet people, or you might be more spread out. The season's a little bit different. So PCT basically lines up. It's pretty cool. Like, you start in the desert, which is, I guess, a really hot and dry stretch. But if you arrive to the Sierras too early, the snow is impassable. So you kind of arrive there just at the right time, and then you get through that. There's often still snow in Northern California, so you traverse that a fair bit. And then by the time you get to Washington, the snow's melted enough for you to go through. But if you get there too late, then there's going to be the snow from the next season. So you kind of have this little weather window that you hit. So if you start heading southbound, you start later. I think it's around June, August. And that has its own challenges too. By the time you get to the Sierra, you need to beat snow. And
I feel you can't do these sort of adventure experiences without it being so transformative. When you finished the Pacific Crest Trail there, how was it then? You have this sense of achieving something so big. What's it like to get to the end point of it? Were you sort of wanting it not to end?
yeah, so I mean, everyone's heard the term like bittersweet before, but at that time, it really was like, I felt like that's the first really bittersweet experience I've had. From the start, all you're doing is thinking about getting to the end. And then when you get there, it's not just like yeah, you get to finish this trail, but you've also spent 4 months of essentially living outside, meeting like insane people. I've spent most of my days with, like, imagine spending every day in like really cool places with the same people for like 4 months. Like, you just develop these really cool bonds. And then you sort of start to get this feeling of dread, maybe the last week or 2 weeks, just thinking like, oh damn, I have to go back to reality. And I got a little taste of it before we started Washington. We took a little side trip into Portland just to have a few days off. It was like the plan from pretty early on. And then when we were there, I just felt really out of place, like a bit of an alien in an urban environment. I didn't think I would feel like that, but yeah, it just felt weird. People would like look at me strange. I guess because I just looked like, I mean, when you picture a hiker, you probably picture someone with like long pants, a long shirt, boots, and a huge backpack. But through hiking is very, I mean, it's how you do it yourself. But the average through hiker, we wear like trail runners, just like joggers, some shorts, a lightweight t-shirt, and a backpack that, most people probably carry to work each day. So yeah, it like, I definitely feel like I adapted to that lifestyle. You don't see TVs out there. You don't hear the news. Like, there was wars going on that we sort of found out after, and we were like, oh, all right, this is the world that's been still turning while we've been out here. Yeah, and I guess it's just life stripped back to all the essential things like eating, drinking, communicating, often with just people that are very similar to you, and think, yeah, like, just enjoy the outdoors. And then, yeah, to get to the end basically means that's being stripped away from you, to the point where I had friends. So I met a guy on day 2, and we almost walked the whole thing together. There was a section where we like split up, but then we caught up. And after that, him and 2 other guys that we walked with a fair bit, they were like, well, we're not ready to stop. So they went and walked the Colorado Trail, and then they finished the Colorado, and they were like, let's go to Arizona. And they walked the Arizona Trail, and then they flew from there to New Zealand and walked the TA, just back to back to back to back, because they were just like, well, when else are we going to get to live like this and continue this? So yeah, to answer your question, it is very bittersweet and sad to finish, but it's also a pretty happy experience, because if there was no finish, you would never, like, I don't know, it might not be so beautiful if you just kept going forever.
This has probably come up in a few episodes of the podcast before, and it's because it's a constant for people who take these adventures, is when something big comes to an end. It's changed you, but then you go back to a world that probably, I mean, you were talking wars had started while you were away. You were disconnected from the world. So there were things that you observed that were different. But when you get back home, that's all the same. It's a really interesting concept to have that thing come to an end. It's interesting when you were talking about those people who you met on day 2. I don't want this to end. I need it to keep continuing. Sometimes I see that in people as well, that need to always have something to look forward to.
Yeah.
From everyone that I've ever spoken to about through hikes who's done it, just like you're saying, Jack, it's an experience which totally changes you, but you feel energized reflecting back on it too. I can just hear it in the way you talk about it.
Yeah, it's good memories. I always think about, like, I reflect on why maybe it makes me feel different to normal life. Same with bikepacking. I get the same feeling. I think it's because in these, like in everyday life, you might not get the opportunity very much to like feel accomplished or like you've really done something, whether you're just going to work or probably rarely get through a day and be like, wow, that was something cool I did there. Whereas in these experiences, you kind of get that every day, even in a pretty boring day or a mundane day, you've still ridden 150 kilometers or you've still walked 30 kilometers, which is something to be proud of, I guess.
I'm trying to think, have I ever walked over 20 kilometers? I think I have. That's a lot of steps. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I could only imagine what your step count would be if you're someone who counts those. Like, what's a step count on like a 50K day?
My watch every day would be like 70 to
Oh
80,000.
my gosh. Yeah, I could just imagine the come down for that. Another question I had for you then, Jack, is obviously, you're a bikepacker before you're a through hiker. You've through hiked there 4 months exactly, doing this monumental achievement, one of the world's most renowned through hikes. You come back, you get back into bikepacking. When did the Tour Divide come into your head and did through hiking? I guess the way I want to say is, did you always want to do the Tour Divide race, or did through hiking maybe make you think, oh, maybe I'd rather do that more instead?
I guess a bit of both. So I knew about the Tour Divide early on. Sort of discovered the Tour Divide, didn't look too much into it, but I always knew what it was. And then when I started through hiking, I guess just being over in America made me think of it a bit more. And pretty early on in the PCT, I remember saying to one of the guys that I was walking with, "Oh, I'm going to come back next year and I'm going to ride the Tour Divide." And I was explaining what it was, and like in through hiker terms, I was like, "Oh, it's the CDT, but like on a bike. It's a bit different." And then from then, I kind of had it in my head. I'd finished my through hike and I'd got home and I was chatting to my mate Rowan, who I got into riding with, and I said, "I think I'm going to do the Divide next year." And he said, "I'm doing it too. Me and my partner are going to do it." And I was like, "This is perfect." Unfortunately, they couldn't end up doing it because of some injuries and stuff, but they'll be back out there this year, I think. But yeah, I guess from that moment, as soon as I sort of said, "I'm going to do that," whether I meant it at the time, like after I said it, I was locked in to myself. And then, yeah, I just did everything I needed to and until the lead up. And then still same thing. I got to Banff and I was like, what am I doing? What the hell have I got myself into?
Because
But
it's huge. And look, you cut your teeth on the hunt, mate. So you have the legs for it. You can't do the hunt and think that you don't. But my gosh, the distance for it as well. Actually, quickly, how was it riding a bike after not riding a bike but walking for so long? Like, did walking fitness translate into riding fitness?
a little bit. I don't think I rode my bikes like very soon after finishing the PCT. Like my feet were pretty destroyed. My legs were sore. Yeah, I just needed a break, I think. But when I think like you said about the hunt, I think Australia is such a insane training place for bikepacking in general. It's like it's not as I guess it's pretty sparse in terms of resupply points. Like a 4 day resupply is not out of the ordinary. It's so steep, it can be dry. So then going to somewhere else like the Divide, where I could just take 1 day of food, I was like, oh my god, this is incredible. It's just like a different world. Yeah,
Yeah, your bike's a bit lighter when it's only got 1 day of food and water on it as well. Like,
yeah.
you're totally correct there. I've never thought of it in that way before, to be honest with you. I think the other thing, especially like, we specifically talk about the Australian high country, it's got a good mix of terrain to learn some of those long distance bikepacking skills on as well. So you've got some beautiful champagne gravel type roads there if you want them that can be nice and fast and flowy, but you've also got those steep, rocky, gravelly, steep descents. You've got river crossings. You've got steep uphills that seem to go forever. So that's something that from a skill point of view, you also get to put in your little saddlebag of experience there and take that across with you too. Something you said was like you couldn't believe it when you got to Banff and you got to the start line, you were going to be there. Something that didn't get to the start line initially was your bike though. My gosh, talk us through that. It's like worst nightmare.
Yeah.
You put your bike on the plane with so much hope and you stand at the carousel waiting for it to come out at you at the other end. What happened when it didn't? It's like those hash browns that were never cooked, man.
Yeah, worse. Oh, that broke my heart. I think you're so nervous already, flying completely across the world to do some crazy adventure. And then when the one thing you need to do that adventure is your bike and it doesn't arrive, it's pretty heartbreaking. Especially because like dealing with the airline, they were like, "Oh, we don't have a record of you checking in a bag." And I was like, "Oh my God, it's gone. Like I'm not." And everyone's suggesting, "Oh, can you borrow a bike? Can you?" But it's just like, it's my bike's like my partner, I'm not I'm not going in without it.
What bike did you use? I think it was a hunt bike, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a Hunt Land Cruiser, which I actually only switched to 1 week before I left.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because normally you want your gear absolutely dialed. Like you want to know this seat work, these handlebars work. I know how the way the bike feels and handles. What prompted the switch just before you left?
So my bike prior to that was an All City Gorilla Monsoon, which I loved. I'd done pretty much all my riding on that. After I got the Surly, I soon felt like I outgrew that because rides like the Hunt, you need fat tires, you need bigger tires, and I was pretty limited. So I upgraded to the All City, and I rode that for a long time. And then Dan Hunt is a good mate of mine, and we were chatting just before I went, and we were going over my bike and just tightening everything up. And he's like, "I'd love to see a Hunt on the Divide. Do you want to? We can work out some sort of deal, and do you want to take a Hunt?" And I was like, I was kind of scared because obviously, changing bikes, all the things you mentioned is always a huge risk. But I kind of lined the bikes up. I got them both in Photoshop and I like turned the opacity down and I was like, how different are they? And I gathered that they were similar enough in the important parts like seat position and stuff that I could make it work. Swapping from a steel bike to a titanium carbon fork bike was enough of a like reward for me that I was willing to take that risk. So I switched it over, rode as much as I could, and then all seemed all right. So yeah, that's what I rode. I'm happy I did. Like it was such a nice bike to ride.
It was solid, and I think you even mentioned in the film, I don't think you even had one puncture.
No, I had nothing.
Awesome.
I do take a lot of care of my gear. I'm really particular with that. I go over my stuff all the time. And as well as when I'm riding, I'm always very cautious. It's probably a downfall as well, like if you're trying to go really fast. Not that I'm going slow, but I'm really picking my lines and things like that, which I think all contributes to that. But yeah, having a solid bike and going over it completely before the start, like 1 week before the start of the race, also helped, I think.
Yeah, and I guess you're probably more attuned to really checking it out because it was so new to you too. So you're
Yeah.
probably really setting it up and dialing it in that week before. But when it doesn't turn up, oh my gosh. So what happened then? Like you arrived 3 days before the start or 3 days
Yeah.
before you got to bat. What happened in those 3 days to get your beautiful machine to you for the start line?
So my flight path was from Sydney to San Francisco, where I would spend the night in San Francisco and then fly to Calgary the next morning. So I realized my bike wasn't there in San Francisco. So my option was try stay in San Francisco and get my bike and then go to Calgary, or just get to Calgary and then try work it out. So I chose that. It just seemed like it made more sense for me to be at the start line at least. And then back and forth with the airline, I couldn't find my bike. My wonderful mother posted all over Facebook and found the airline had like a premium lounge Facebook group that she posted in, asking if there was any contacts that they had. And a guy that works at Sydney Airport, Nick, shout out to Nick, absolute legend.
Nick, you're a legend.
Yeah, he doesn't work for the airline or anything. He just is a staff member at the airport. And he messages me and he was like, I'm pretty sure I seen your bike, like the box, at work tonight. And I was like, oh my God, this could be something. So he's like, I'm at work in the morning, I'll check for you. And if it is, I'll get it sorted. And yeah, surely enough it was. He sent me a photo. And I was in Calgary at this stage and my bike was in Sydney where I departed, which is, if you've ever done that flight, it's a long way. And I was thinking like, oh my god, even if you get it on the plane now, it's going to be tight. Anyway, the airline I flew with, they still sucked. They were like, oh, we can put it on a plane tomorrow. And so another airline stepped up for me, which was awesome. Shout out to Air Canada. They just threw my bike on their flight. And then, yeah, when it arrived in Calgary, they had a driver deliver it to me in Banff, which at about 4 a.m.
It's really going the extra mile. Far out.
Yeah, I needed it at that time too. I was a mess.
So hang on, it arrives at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Hang on, is that 4 a.m. on the race day or just the day before?
The
or
day
like...
before. So I spent that day building it, sorting out the bits and pieces that get damaged or whatever during transit.
The derailleur was okay?
Yeah, thank God. I had that in I took my derailleur off, put it in a box with bubble wrap. But even when I got my bike, everything had been pulled out at customs, including that out of the box. So I was just stressing until the moment I hopped on it and rode down that main street at Banff. That was the first time I'd felt relieved.
You could see that there's a moment in the film right at the start where you're doing it and then it just pops up. It works. It's yay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've brought this up before. Sometimes in ultras, when you're on that emotional roller coaster, which you captivate so well in your film, there's a point where if you're really tired and everything hurts and you just feel broken, sometimes you secretly start wishing that you want your bike to break. It's just the excuse that you give yourself to the get out of jail card. I don't need to do this anymore. But I felt the total opposite with you. I felt that there was no hoping for the bike to break. You just wanted to keep getting there.
Yeah.
And there were things that happened there that were, I guess, things that could definitely be showstoppers. You actually took a day out during the race. Mid-race, you took the decision I needed to have a day off the trail because of injury. Your Achilles flared up really badly. Talk me through that.
My Achilles is something that I've had problems with in the past a little bit, but it hasn't worried me too much. But yeah, about a week into the divide, it started to get bad. It's not uncommon, I think, with riding. I think a lot of people can relate. In the morning, you might have a few things that are sore here and there, but after half an hour, your body's warmed up and it's all set in. But this day it just felt a bit different and it just kept getting worse to the point where I couldn't even pedal anymore. My Achilles felt like it was kind of full of sand. And I thought that's probably going to be the end. So yeah, I took a day off. I actually took, it was probably about a day and a half, to be honest. I went to a local bike shop in a town called Helena, did a bit of a bike fit, changed a couple of things. And yeah, I guess I just trucked on. I taped the hell out of it. A mate of mine, Lewis, you'd probably know Lewis, winner of the Tour Divide a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
I was messaging him a lot and he was giving me all his tips for treating your Achilles. And yeah, I guess I had help from so many people and I felt like I had so many people backing me and behind me that I couldn't give up without fully having to. So I just trucked on and for a few days it wasn't nice and it slowly got better and I feel like it got stronger because being a tendon, you have to work it to build up the strength again. It's not doing nothing isn't going to help. So I knew if I got it to a place where I could move it without it really agonizing me, that I could continue and get to the end. So that was all my goal was for a long time out there, just keeping that in a place where I could move forward.
Yeah, because, and again, I know I've said this a few times, but something that you captivate really well in your film is the gamut of the roller coaster of emotions. There are moments, and I often wonder how far apart these occurred because, and again, I've said this a few times, I've only ever done one ultra. I've trained for it, so I've done some big long days and I've had those back-to-back days and I felt those emotions. And I think everyone who's done this knows where I'm coming from, is you can have the highest high of your amazing life ever, be in awe and wonder what's all around you. The light is golden. You feel like you've got a tailwind. You can feel
Yeah.
you're dancing on the pedals. It's you might have your favorite music bopping in your head and all this sort of stuff. And then in the space of 2 kilometers, it's you've just gone off a cliff into the depths of despair. And I could see that with that whole Achilles injury, but also at other moments through your experience on the divide. You've got these highs and low highs, and then it's just like, oh, I'm broken. I just had a hard, it's raining again. Like, how many days of rain did you have? But I could see that with your Achilles, that there's a moment where you're at Helena and you've arrived. This might be it. This might be game over for me. I'm injured. I'm going to take a day off and see. And then you see that generation of hope. I'm going to see and get on the bike while you're having that time off, not to go on the trail, but just to ride around and see if things are going to work. And it was really beautiful for me, Jack, when you do get going again, just that happiness that you've got. Like, it's just pure happiness that, yay, maybe this is still possible. Maybe I can keep going. It really transcends through. And to me, what that showed me was doing this, riding bikes, even how hard the scenery is, being surrounded by it, that's obviously what gets you in your proper flow state. That's your happy place. Like, you are energized through this active, adventurous activity. Would you say that that's something you've reflected on yourself? Like, you see that as part of yourself as well?
Definitely. I always jokingly say to people, like, I don't actually think I like riding bikes, or like, I don't like hiking. It's more like what it allows me to do and how it makes me feel, I think. And yeah, even as you were talking about that then, about that sort of sequence from Helena to getting back on the bike, it made me feel a bit emotional, taking me back to there, because there was so many times where I was like, maybe I should just call it quits here. I'm not going to be able to get this Achilles going. It's proven that in the past. Don't break your heart even more. Just call it quits and go enjoy a few weeks off in America. But I don't know. Something told me I could keep it going. And I think the more I do that, the more it's like, I don't know how to explain it. The more times I've shown myself that I can do something like that, the more I know when I'm in a hard time, I'm going to get through it. Like, often you'll see me like in a really hard situation or hard place and I've got a smile or a laugh and I'm like, God, this is bad. Because I know I'm going to get to the end. I know I'm going to get through that thing, and I know I'm going to look back and be like, you got no idea what I just went through. On my Instagram, after I finished, someone that follows me, I think it was in Spanish, but after I translated it, it said, another stripe for the tiger, like, on to the next. And I always think about that comment and like, that's unreal. Like, I picture each adventure or hard time like as a stripe now. And
oh my gosh, I love that. I've never heard of that analogy before.
either have I, but I was like, that's huge, because you can't really, like, I look at them like they're there forever, that stripe, and at this level of strength now, and I'm never going to quit below that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's through the act of doing hard things that you realise the things that you can do. You can do the hard things. I've heard before, when you're in an ultra, never make a decision at night time, never make a decision when you're hungry, never make a decision if you need a coffee or something. Sometimes
Yeah.
what you need is just like a mini break, a mini reset to sort of think things clear. That's what you gave yourself in Helena. And I sort of wonder, Jack, I wonder if you can relate to this. Sometimes your head's so scrambled doing these things because you are freaking sleep deprived, dealing with every new situation. 1 minute it's sunshine and beautiful tailwinds, the next minute, and you're thinking you're going to ride through the night through the entire basin. The next minute,
Yeah.
it's crappy thunderstorm gets you in your tent and turns the next 100 kilometers the next day into peanut butter mud that you got to hike through. And you're dealing with that on stuff all energy because it's taking
Yeah.
everything out of you. Sometimes the ability to have that pause button really shows you the possibilities of what you have inside you to keep going.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
So I want to ask you a question. It's going to be a new question I'm going to ask my guests on the show, and it only came up in my last episode there with Jack Greenwood, and that was something Jack said he thinks is the best question to ask people is, tell me about a day of your trip. And I love this so much that I've stolen it from you, Jack, and I'm going to use it from now on. So from one Jack to another, tell me about a day on your experience riding the Tour Divide. It can be any day you want. It can be highs, lows. It can be all of it. Pick a day.
One day.
Yeah.
Well, it took me around 26 days. It was like 25 and a half. So there's a lot of days to choose from. All is equally as good and bad as each other. But I don't know, maybe as cliche as it is, probably the last day. I basically went into the last day knowing if it was going to be the last day. Or when I woke up, I was set on, I'm getting there today. But I woke up, I was trashed, but I don't know, I just had so much energy because I knew I was going to be able to push there to the end, and rode through the day, and it was really hot. I think we were through a heat wave, and it reached up to 45 degrees.
That is steaming.
Yeah.
This is in New Mexico, right?
Yeah, no shade, nothing. So we were just, the only way to keep semi-cool was to really be moving. And I caught up with this dude that I'd been seeing on the dots for a long time, this other guy from Australia named Wes, and we pretty much rode most of the last day together.
Hey, Wes.
Yeah, shout out to Wes, legend. And we got to maybe 70 kilometers to go, and I'd organized us a ride from the terminus back to where we were staying that night. And it's about 70 kilometers. It's a one-way road. You kind of touch the fence and then you have to get out somehow. And we knew we weren't going to, like, let's say we were going to reach the fence at 12 a.m. maybe, but we knew that the guy wasn't going to be able to pick us up until 1 or 2 a.m. because he was doing other rides. So on that last 70 Ks, we were just cruising. There was tarantulas on the road, and we would stop and we would video them, and there was snakes and these kangaroo mice and stuff. And we kind of just slowed down, and we were like, what's the rush? Let's enjoy the last little bit. Yeah, that was probably one of the most vivid memories. I've got a lot, but that was pretty special. And people always comment, like, if you go on my YouTube comments, like, why is there no one there to meet you? Like, why don't the organizers, why aren't they at the end? Or is that the finish? But it puts the emphasis on the adventure. Like, I loved that was the finish. Like, I waved out a border patrol guy and I was like, hey, can you come and put your car here and turn your light bar on so I can get a photo? Like, there was no one even to take a photo,
You literally put your hand on the sign of the fence, right? It's like a border station at Antelope Wells. It's like, I'm trying to remember what the sign is. Is it like a penalty sign or something?
Yeah, I don't know. It's something.
There we go. Touch. I'm there. I've made it. It's like, it is so low key. I mentioned that to April Drage, a guest of the podcast, who...
Yeah, she smashed it.
Oh, she's amazing. And she's so energized by it. I'm energized just thinking about it. And April... I love everything about the way that you take to these adventures. But yeah, we were talking about just this. It's so low key. It's I think nearly every ultra, like, it's happenstance. You had Wes there and you're finishing up and stuff, but it's happenstance if there's anybody sometimes at the finish line.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's not about that at all.
Yeah.
Did you have visions of the finish line through the race? You said, what was it, 25 and a half days to get through it. Did you have thoughts in your mind of getting to the finish, or was it always just breaking it down into milestones of that specific day?
Yeah, I think I definitely thought about the end at times, especially from like a filmmaker point of view. I do have to think ahead and think like, okay, I roughly know what the finish looks like. How could I maybe get a shot of that? But yeah, I'm just big on focusing on day by day. I think if you look at the big picture too much, you might drive yourself a bit crazy. Yeah, but that's just my point of view. Like, I would just think, okay, I just need to get here. Yeah.
It's also just breaking it down into achievements, because when you set yourself on the start line of a race that's over 4,000 kilometres long,
yeah,
a race where for some lads you need a haircut by the time you get to the end of it, it's such an achievement. And so the finish can often feel so far away and so overwhelming too, especially when things aren't going well. Like, there's times where you're probably wondering, how on earth am I just going to get myself up this climb? Was it the wall or another climb I'm trying to think of in your film? It's like, I have just watched a guy grab his bike by the handlebars and drag it sideways up this climb and try and get a view. And he goes, there's the guys, you can't tell how steep it is, but they've been there for 15 minutes. And I don't know why gradients never come across on film. Maybe you do as a filmmaker. As a photographer, I've always hated the fact that something that's so deathly steep can almost look imperceptibly flat.
Yeah.
But they didn't look like they were too far ahead of you. Maybe 50 meters, 100 meters, maybe.
Yeah, I look at that shot and I'm like, you can't even tell.
No.
But it's, yeah.
So sometimes you're trying to figure out how am I going to get up there. You can't think of something 4,000 k's away. I do want to know though, was the wall the worst thing you had to haul your bike up or down, or was there even worse than that?
No, I actually did the wall. I don't know. I didn't mind it. I think maybe my bike was slightly lighter, not as light as it is now, but
It's all the Aussie stuff, mate. Aussie high country got you prepped.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Coco claims on day one is a pretty big push, but the hardest part was probably flat riding, to be honest. In the headwinds got so brutal. They were the only things that made me look a lot into the future and think, if I have 7 days of this, can I, like mentally, can I do that? Because there would be points where I'd be on a 4 or 5% gradient downhill, and I would be standing up out of my saddle, crunching gears just to move forward. The headwinds were that brutal.
I think every listener who rides a bike here can relate to the brutality of a headwind. But you're right, like,
Yeah, it's awful.
I can't even imagine thinking of 7 days of it.
Oh, there was more. I think the second half was brutal headwinds, to the point where I don't know, I would just push through it during the day, and it would get to nighttime. It's like as soon as it would hit 7 p.m., the wind would just disappear, and I'd be like, oh my God, thank God. And I would just push on as long as I could at night, because they were the only hours of kind of reprieve from the wind.
I've heard that of a strategy from a few people of trying to switch your sleep cycle, not that there's much sleep had, a little bit so that you can make good use of the calmer hours during the night where the wind's not at its worst. It's not to say that it's dead quiet and there's no wind, but it's not raging. Crunching through gears to ride downhill and just keep forward momentum sounds brutal. What do you think was worse, the headwind or the rain?
Headwind for sure.
Mm.
Rain, I feel like you can adapt to it.
Yeah.
Like at first it sucks, and then after a few days of it, you're like, it just feels like the norm. Whereas wind is just, it just is soul crushing. I had no skin left on my lips; it was all burnt off, and every night it would sort of put like a gooey layer of skin over my lips, and then after an hour of riding, they were just red raw again. And yeah, the wind was definitely the worst part. I would say that was the closest to breaking me. I feel like I did break a few times, but it just took, hopping off the bike for 5 minutes and eating like a Mars bar or something to be like, all right, let's just get on to the next town or the next milestone.
Something else that I really noticed there when I was watching through your experience, Jack, was it almost felt like the sun was like your energy supply. Sometimes you'd go through these horrible moments, but then you'd be in this landscape and the sun's out, and I could just see that your energy levels, it was like you were solar powered. Did you feel that at all?
Yeah, I felt that for sure. I think it always happened to line up with like nice areas as well. It wasn't like I was on some brutal climb and then the sun popped out. Or maybe it did, but I didn't notice it in those times. But yeah, like I remember a few specific times where I was like, I had a 50-kilometer climb pretty early on, and it was raining like crazy. The wind was really brutal too. I was quite frozen. And then everyone sort of in my little bubble decided to pull up early that day because the weather was shocking at about 2 o'clock. But I don't know. I looked out and it looked like it was maybe going to clear up. So I pushed on, and like, yeah, that was one of the best decisions I made. It gave me some good momentum, and the sun, like, yeah, it just was almost like a fresh start on the ride. And I think the day before, my ankle was probably at its worst. This was after I started again. There was a few rough days after that. But yes, I definitely can relate to the solar-powered mention you had.
As a lover of the outdoors and with your filmmaker's eyes, I could imagine, were there times where you're riding along going, oh my God, like, where am I? What is this place? This is like, just the scenery would be energizing as well. Notwithstanding it's hurting your legs because it's up and down. You're crossing mountain ranges, but just, was that energizing for you as well, just being in these monumental landscapes?
Oh, definitely. I think that's something I learned on the Pacific Crest. Just like appreciate what's in front of you. And as we've spoken about before, like Australia, although I think it's like one of the best countries ever and it's so beautiful, it's just not, there's not as much of a contrast as countries like America, particularly on these routes where mountains are so crazy and sharp and green and high, I guess, as we have here. So yeah, when I see views like that, or I might see a really cool animal or something, it's definitely pretty energizing. And it's I guess I just have moments where I think like, God, how good is it to be here right now? Like I could be at home doing nothing, or I can be here. Like I'm hurting, but this is just beautiful, and that kind of gives me energy to push on, or yeah, keep going.
In a way, in terms of the motivation to do the Tour Divide, do you think you were more motivated by the goal of seeing whether you could complete something that big, or was your motivation about spending so much time riding through that type of landscape?
I think both. I knew it was going to be a really beautiful ride. I try not to do like too much research into like where I'm going to be riding. Enough that I'm safe and I know where I'm going, but I don't want to like spoil too many things. But I also, yeah, just I mean, I knew from the start that I would finish. I just had that in my head, assuming I didn't get injured. I knew I had it in me. But yeah, like part of doing it was definitely to see the landscape, and particularly the Rockies. Like I hadn't been to the Rockies before. I came close sort of in the northern parts of Washington on the Pacific Crest. But yeah, I wanted to see the Rockies, and I wanted to see Colorado really bad. And yeah, this seemed like a good way to be able to do that.
Everywhere looked amazing. Wyoming looked amazing.
Yeah, it was all beautiful.
Oh, isn't it what? And a lot of people actually comment when they do the Tour Divide. Sometimes their favourite place is, and maybe not for you because you had ridiculous headwinds, but like New Mexico is just so blown away by just how amazing it was there. How did you feel about riding through there, headwinds aside, like scenery wise?
I love New Mexico. I think the rest of the route is really beautiful, but on a spectrum of difference in terrain, the rest is somewhat similar. It's beautiful mountains or beautiful fields or lakes and things like that. Whereas New Mexico it's a different world. It feels like you're on the moon or something in some areas. And it's so vast, and there's like a clear line. You're sort of in New Mexico for a day or so, and you're like, oh, this isn't that different. And then you just come through these trees, and from then on, you're in the desert. And yeah, I found it really cool. I could see why a lot of people would say it's their favorite part. I know Lael Wilcox always talks about how, I think she even lives down in the desert somewhere, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's definitely a cool place to be. It's hard in terms of like it's long water carries, and it's a bit less established, but I feel like being at the end, you also just have this energy. You're close, you know you're getting there. You can pinpoint, oh, I'll be getting there on this day around this time, and that's pretty motivating.
I'm just thinking too, like, you were talking about resupply points are further apart in the desert there. You probably had to think about a little bit that more there. I'm sort of imagining all along this trail, like you've got big towns and big sort of points on the trail, big markers and big mountain passes. But I imagine you're going through so many, in Australia, we'd nearly call them blink and miss it towns.
Yeah, yeah.
What sort of small town America, what part of small town America really imparted so much in your mind? Like when you reflect back, it's just a memory of like a particular small town. What was that like rolling into places? I think you got excited at one point because, and I don't think this was a small town, but there was a Subway somewhere.
Yeah.
You actually even got excited by SpaghettiOs for dinner, which is quite funny. Small town America to me feels really different. Like describe what it's like rolling into like one of those small towns during a race.
Yeah. Oh, small town America is cool. I like it. It's definitely interesting and different to hear. People are people are patriotic all over America, but in country towns, it feels like more of an identity. But when I would be getting into towns, I would just be thinking like, I had two thoughts: what can I sleep under, and where can I eat food? So they would just be my two missions, and then I could sort of. It's like once I would find those two things, I could turn off, and I'd be like, all right. Then I could look around or like process what else is going on. But I'm trying to think of a clear example. I guess towns are really different depending on where you are. Some are like, you're dodging Trump flags to get into town, and some are like you're getting chased by wild dogs in New Mexico.
Oh.
So it's just, yeah, it's a huge mix. That's one element of New Mexico that can be tough, the dogs that are around.
What's your dog strategy?
Survive. There was one time I got sort of pinned on a highway. This huge German Shepherd ran out onto the road, and I was on one side of the road and it was on the other, and it was going crazy. And then it had these two other dogs with it. I don't know what breed they were, but they were huge and white. They made the German Shepherd look small. And they weren't barking, but they were just like, I could tell they were just waiting for that dog to have a go at me. I would be here and it was across from me. I would wait till the car would go past and I would sneak a meter forward and a meter forward and a meter forward. And out there's not many cars. So that took a long time. And eventually I just hopped on my bike and rode as hard as I could. And I just got chased. And it's not uncommon. You'll hear a lot of dog stories from New Mexico.
Yeah, actually, I think another state in America that's notorious for it, which is on the Trans-America Trail, bike trail, is Kentucky.
Yeah, right.
Dog chases in Kentucky are a thing. Because, Jack, would you agree, we don't really have that experience here in Australia? In the high country, there's wild dogs. I feel they're more likely to run away from you than run to you, though.
Yeah, I would agree.
Generally, riding around, don't have that experience of being chased by dogs so much. Maybe you have. I certainly haven't.
Yeah, I haven't here. I think most dogs here are like a farm Kelpie or something that's pretty well trained. And
Yeah.
they're at a house that's off the road and stuff. But
yeah.
New Mexico did feel a bit rogue like that.
Rogue state. Wow. I have to ask, when you were in Pie Town, did you have a pie?
Oh, yeah. So Pie Town, I got in, that was another really long, hot stretch. Over 100 kilometers, I did I had drank 7 liters maybe. And I ran out by the end. And I got there. I knew what Pie Town was because the Toaster House is a really iconic thing on the Continental Divide. All the shoes, I've seen it in so many videos. So yeah, getting to Pie Town, I went straight to the shop. And the guy that owns that is a legend. So if you're a hiker or a rider, you get a free piece of pie.
Ooh.
And these are like huge pieces of, I think I got like a key lime pie. I also ordered like some other one, and then I got him to make me like 4 egg and hash brown rolls.
Oh my gosh, Jack, we are so aligned with our food tastes here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just imagining like big agricultural slices of pie here. It's exactly what you need. That's so good. Do they do savoury pies as well? Or it's just sweet?
No, they don't. I feel like they're not really a thing in America. Like maybe like a pumpkin pie or something, but
nah.
not like Australia.
Nah, you got to come to Australia for a good meat pie. Meat pie with some sauce. Oh, yum.
Yeah. Yeah, it is funny when you talk about a pie and people pretty much in the rest of the world, what they see is like a key lime pie or a cherry tart or something
cherry
like
pie,
that.
exactly. And we're here thinking Drover, does it have bacon in it? Is it meat and cheese or all those sort of time?
Yeah, exactly. Different worlds.
There's some good veggie pies out there too. I'm just putting the call out. Australia does great savoury pies. I always wonder what pies people order up when they're in Pie Town though. So key lime sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool place, Pie Town. It's in the middle of nowhere, population, 0.
Oh, here's small town America for you, right?
Yeah, it is very small town America. And then from there, from Pie Town, you push straight into this, I guess, a national park or something. I'm not sure what the technicality of it is, but it's called the Gila. It's a national forest. And that's known to be a very dry, barren, long stretch with no water. So you Pie Town feels like a little like calm before the storm.
Yeah.
You get there, you feel like you get ready to go to war for a while.
Can you take pie with you? Like I'm sort of thinking the way they make their pies are not necessarily big transportable ones, are they?
No, it's just like a huge. I'd imagine at the start of the day they make a huge one, and you get a big slice. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, well that's cool. Every podcast episode has to feature food somehow. So, Pie Town, thank you, Jack. We've obviously mentioned quite a lot here about your film, your documentary that you made of it. What was really intriguing to me was it wasn't a documentary made by someone just riding the trail, because people can ride the Tour Divide route, the Great Divide mountain bike route here, and people do, and I enjoy watching those films as well. But you were racing. So to take the decision to film a documentary with such high quality in the manner that you did, whether it's the handheld shots, whether it's from your camera, whether it's from your drone, like it's not lost on me the amount of time that takes place to do that.
Yeah.
When did you make the decision that was something you were going to do?
I think probably around the time that I decided to ride the Divide. I knew I wanted to make a film on it. I think like the bike space is an area where there isn't many like films per se. There's a lot of videos out there, but I wanted to take like more of a cinematic approach. Yeah, I decided on that, and then it was a matter of, all right, how's that possible without really. I had two considerations. Like, what's the minimum gear for the best film? And I had to work that out. And then also, what would not slow me down too much? When you say race, I guess I was racing, but more so just like racing the clock. I think in the divide, it's probably only the top 10 that are really racing, trying to kill it. But that was like a new concept to me. So everyone I sort of met out there was kind of the same. It's just like a personal challenge. But with that, I still wanted to get it done as quick as I can. I sort of set myself 28 days. I thought I'd really be really happy with that if I could make a film within that time. So yeah, there was definitely moments where I would, be talking out loud, and I would be like, just stop, pull over, get this shot. You'll regret it later if you don't. It's an extra 10 minutes out of your day. And I would be like, oh, all right. Especially if I was maybe riding on and off with someone, for me to be like, all right, I'll see you later. Pull the drone out or things like that.
Because that's sort of giving up the opportunity to sort of have company a bit on the way as well.
Yeah, which through long nights can really help.
Absolutely. Because there are a few times where you've got some riders in your shots there, which is pretty cool. I thought that was awesome as well. Because obviously before we were talking about the Pacific Crest Trail film you did, you can see the people that you're there. You see the people that you're walking with there as well. They're right throughout it. But yeah, there's a lot of solitary moment on the Tour Divide. To me, that's so right. I can think so vividly. I'm a passionate photographer. I've spoken about it a lot on the podcast. A lot of my motivation for riding places is to see landscapes. When I was living in Australia full time, all my bike riding was done early doors to get away from traffic and stuff like that. And I tell you now, my alarm would go off at a stupid o'clock. It had a 4 in front. The first thing I would do, though, was look out the window and go, do I have a magic sky perhaps happening this morning? Because that's what my motivation and energy was from. And I always remember vividly, sometimes I have not had the ability to stop for one reason or another, and this magic moment that nature's giving me on a plate is just passing me by. And I've just got to go, just enjoy it, just look around, look at the light.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to stop. I've never, ever, ever regretted taking time out to stop to get a shot. And I imagine you sound like you feel the same way with the way that you did your film, because there's times where you're riding along with the drone, so at least you're sort of moving forward and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I know what it's like having a drone. It's not the sort of thing that, it only takes 30 seconds to get it up and going. It's a commitment to get that type of shot. So I can fully appreciate that. But there's shots also of you riding up a climb. So to do that, you've had to have gone there, got your camera up there, ridden up there, or maybe you had your drone flying, pointing at you. But there's a lot of consideration that goes into it. Obviously, you made the decision to film it before you started, right? Before the start line, when you signed up, you're filming it. As the days wore on, was it harder for you to stop and film, or was it just it was the same challenge from day to day?
No, I think you're definitely correct. Like, as time went on and my distance from the finish grew shorter, I was more aware of time. At the start, you're far away. You're going to be there in weeks. But as you sort of start counting down, I get more conscious of time. And I sort of look at time like it's like money. And I think, okay, how am I going to spend my time today? And I really want to be conscious of how I'm doing that. And also, like, another note on my filming, especially with drones and stuff, I really want to be like low impactful on other people. I won't get my drone out around other people. I don't want to annoy anyone. I know firsthand how annoying those things can be.
Absolutely.
Like when you're in a beautiful location and all you hear is like this, it's infuriating to me. So I don't put that on other people as well. So even, if I get to a beautiful place and I'm with someone and I'm like, I need to get this shot, but I'm not going to ruin their time, I'll, maybe wait or things like that, which also adds to it. But yeah, as time went on, it definitely became harder. And that's when I'd have like a lot more internal battles about filming, or as I went on, I was also more exhausted. And in those moments, it's sometimes harder to film.
I'm so glad that you did. And actually, there's a moment, I'm trying to think, was it in the basin perhaps? Sure, there's so many moments like this. When you're filming, it's like 4:00 in the morning, and you've got that very familiar to me ultra face on in that you so deeply need so much more sleep. Your eyes are puffy. You can tell that you're weary and you've got a big day ahead of you. And I was so happy that you filmed in those moments. I think for me, what makes your film so different is the fact that you were in an event doing this, taking time out to do it, but it's just the best insight into what it's really like to go through the highs and the lows. April did this a little bit with her race in that she does like little videos that get put up. Media Team Dave,
Yeah, partner does it.
her hubby, puts them up on her Instagram. They're awesome, aren't they? The thing with April is she's always so freaking happy.
Yeah, she is.
April, I'm not saying that you didn't have low moments. I know that you probably did, but she's just so, like, her film's just like, wow, everything's
Yeah,
awesome. And it was cool to get an insight in with you as well there when things were awesome. Invariably, you had some great moments each and every day, I'm sure, but you also filmed during the not so awesome times and what it was like. And I could sort of see that mental churn going on with you and the build up of the mental fatigue.
yeah, there was a lot of that.
Can I ask, do you think you gained any strength and inner resilience from having done the hard stuff with like the Pacific Crest Trail before? I know it's a different demand on the body, but from a long distance perspective, you knew that you could finish big, long things because of that previous experience as well.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like I met a dude out there and we are just chatting about stuff and we got onto the PCT because I think he was from maybe one of the towns that are on the trail. And he was like, oh, you're a thru hiker. You'll be fine on this. And I think I sort of half had the same mentality, just knowing that I can push on through harder times. And yeah, I don't know. I just always had the belief that I could get to the end. It's just a matter of when.
There was a real moment where that came across a lot. And it was probably a moment where you really appeared more emotional than at other times. There's times where you're talking to the camera and it's almost like you're talking to convince yourself that you can get there. I don't know if that resonates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you're your own company. You got to give yourself the pep talk, right? And there's a time where you're like, I'm going to do this. I think you'd figured out you'd had maybe, I'm just trying to think, was it like I've got 10 days left or was it I've got a week left?
Yeah. Yeah. A week left. I know exactly what you're talking about.
A bit emotional there. I think you mentioned you actually had something that you were carrying along with you from Mike Hall that you were wanting to take to the finish line. And I think that's the moment maybe where I don't know whether you're half giving yourself a pep talk at that moment or whether that's the moment where you truly believed you're going to get there. And with all the emotion that comes up from racing and stuff like that, that was quite a time.
Yeah, definitely. I actually remember that so vividly because it was a huge turning point for me. I just had probably three of my most, like, I guess, sleepless days back to back. Within those 2 days, you have the highest point on the route, and straight after that, you have another ridiculous stretch. And I was pretty broken. I'd planned to camp at a hut one night, and I'd pushed till about 3:30 in the morning, and it was locked. And it was the next day that that all hit me. I was pretty destroyed. Yeah, and I remember it was almost like not a breakdown, but not far off it. But I remember as soon as that happened and I turned off the camera, I felt like a new person. Music was hitting at the right time, and I was like riding hands off the bars, and you go from such high highs to low lows really quickly, and that can go both ways.
Mm.
And I think sometimes just like accepting the low can get you to that high a lot quicker. And I think, yeah, carrying something to Mike's also was a huge motivator for me because I know if someone can push them through such like hard times over such a short amount of period, then what I'm doing it's so possible.
Just that inner belief that you can take from that too. The cool thing, Jack, about you taking the time out, even having the inner battle with your mind of whether or not to film or not at certain times, the cool thing is you did it now and you've got such a great way to relive those moments. Other people can experience what it's been like for you, but you now can, turn it back and look at those moments of
Yeah.
yourself as well. Do you think that there's going to be a point where you're going to sign yourself up for another really long distance bikepacking event? Do you think you would film it again?
Yeah, I think for me, my like love for making films is as strong or if not stronger than like the biking itself. So that was also a motivating factor for me. When I was out there, I was like, well, I've filmed 2 weeks or whatever. If I quit now, then I have no film. What's the point? So yeah, those two go hand in hand for me. So I would definitely do that. And filming is something I just have a lot of love for. Over the past few days, I've just been going out and just filming stuff just to practice my editing or like different things. So I'm always excited to be like, all right, how good can I make my next thing? And it makes it hard to watch my old stuff because I know I've evolved a lot since then. But it also, yeah, it makes me equally as excited for the future. And I know you would be the same. You would like look at a new microphone or something, and you're like, oh my god, I can't wait to have this like upgrade in my thing. And if you look for video in the future, things like that, like there's always ways to level up and look forward to how you're gonna implement that.
Yeah.
And I feel exactly the same on the bike. Yeah, it's a cool journey.
You don't have many films on your YouTube channel, but definitely people take the time out and watch them. They are amazing. And I'm looking forward to watching this space continually, Jack, with you and seeing what's to come. Like we said 6 weeks ago, you finished your third Hunt 1000. Do you think that's it for the Hunt for you? Or do you think you'll keep coming back for more on that one?
Every time I've done the Hunt, I've said I've ticked it off. But there'll probably be more in the future. I'd love to follow the route and make a film like of me not riding, just a film of the event because I think it's so cool. That was actually the plan this year, or last year, but I changed my mind and rode it instead. But yeah, I think there'll probably be more in that. Just like the Divide, I think there's potentially another run in that for me. Yeah, with everything, I always say it's my last, but track history shows that it's often not.
I often wonder what time frame it takes for the rose-coloured glasses to come on, and
yeah, not long.
Because actually, were there moments in the Divide where you were just looking forward to it all being over?
Yeah, I think definitely. I went through that a lot. Not in the sense that like, oh, I just want to be done now, but I could feel the relief of when I will be done. I think without that, you don't have something to chase as well. I think it's a bit of a necessity, whether you're like fully aware of it or not. All it takes is like you to be quite exhausted or sleep deprived to just know like, oh, it is going to be nice when I can have a break or give my poor body a rest. And
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely had those thoughts.
Did you have a strategy for those thoughts too? Because I think going into things like this, you're going to hit some dark places of, your mind having doubts. Did you ever have like a strategy of how you would draw yourself out of that hole? Like, did you know what the solutions were to bring you back to life?
I'm very, very solitary in how I train and ride, I guess. I don't, I won't often reach out to someone and be like, oh, I'm going through it. I'm in a hard place. Sometimes I do for sure, but I try to just internalize everything. I'm very aware that I can get through those hard times. So yeah, I try to look at myself from a third person and I just like take the emotion out of it. And I just keep pushing. You'll get through, and you know the feeling too. You get to a really long day. It's been a really hard day, and you finally finish, and you're just laying in bed, and you're like, "Oh my god, I got through that. It wasn't actually that bad." But in the moment, it was the worst thing you've ever been through. So I'm just like acutely aware of that feeling, I guess. And I obviously use things like music is a huge one. Yeah, sometimes just stopping and eating for 5 minutes and putting your legs up is enough as well. But I think more just being aware of the state you're in. Like, I'm in a really bad way right now, like physically or mentally. That's all right. You're going to get through it. Just do what you need right now.
Yeah, like 1 minute you're like, I'm so broken. The next minute in your video, you're giving yourself fist bumps and high fives flying along, no handed. I love that. I love that you took time to sort of groove out there on the bike too.
Yeah.
We talked about music there, Jack, and as I look to wrap up the show, there's 3 questions I finish the show with for all my guests. The first one is music related because as a guest of the show, you get to get a song added to the Seek Travel Ride playlist available now on Spotify. And the question is, if you had to choose a song to be a soundtrack to your trip, to your adventure, what song are you adding? What song's your song?
My Divide song. So my music taste is varied. Majority of the time, I probably belong in like the Bronx or something with my music taste. My Tour Divide song was Spanish Sahara by Foals.
Oh, nice.
Whenever I would like send that song to someone, riding related, I'd put a disclaimer and I would say descents only. Because that song, when it hits, I don't want to ruin it, but anyone that's listening or yourself, just when you get to the top of a big climb or you're a few minutes from the top, press play, and that song will change your life. That'll take you from a bad mood to a good mood.
Oh, I'm looking forward to grooving out to it. Because I have to say, this playlist now, it's such a cool eclectic mix. For me, there's a personal element because I know which songs have been chosen by which guests, and so when I listen to them, I think of what they're thinking when they're writing and stuff like that, which is cool as well. It's like a little insight into stuff.
Yeah, that would be cool.
So, okay, I've got you there. Spanish Sahara by Foals. Actually, quickly, before I ask the last two questions, I'm going to ask one thing back to the Tour Divide. It's something where it's so obvious how each rider's experience can change, even though they're doing the same race, depending on which storm or weather system they're having to navigate through or they've managed to just skirt past.
Yeah.
I think of the people that I've interviewed that done it. If I put you and April, you were in the same race together, you would have vastly different experiences on different parts of the route because of that.
Yeah.
What was the worst sort of section weather-wise that you had to deal with? Was it those headwinds in the Arizona desert, or was there like some monumental biblical thunderstorm that really has embedded itself into you there?
It was the wind, but it was actually so my wind started to get bad. Oh, not my wind, but the wind started to get bad in Colorado. There was a day I'd been riding like sort of on and off with a guy from pretty early on. I wouldn't see him for a few days, and then I would. On this day, he actually pulled the pin. He had a 1-year-old at home, and he was just like missing him like crazy. It broke me, but I kept pushing that day, and there's a section in my video where I'm just stopped and I say something like, you can see how windy it is, and I say like, I can't go forward, but like it's the only way I can go. And that day really ruined me. I pulled over on the side of the road for probably an hour because I was so destroyed. My body was hurting, my Achilles was bad, and I had full intention of hitchhiking to the next town just to have a break. And luckily for me, there was no one there. No one would pick me up. I don't know. It just made me think like, just get back on the bike. You can keep pushing. But that day really broke me pretty bad. But there was good that came from that still.
Would have been such a sliding doors moment if we were able to say, what would have happened if you did get a hitchhike? Like, what would you have done then? Like, you're giving yourself a break. You might head back to the track, or maybe you're in your own thoughts and you're like, you know what? Race over.
Who knows? We'll never know.
No. I'm so glad no one was there.
Yeah, me too.
I must say, there's a sense of a segue into the last two questions. I feel I've already got my answer there, but I got to keep it consistent and I got to ask them anyway. Jack, the last two questions of the show, I asked this of all my guests. The first one, when given the choice one day that you would have to slog up a relentless, constant hill climb, or alternatively, you could choose to skip out on the hill and slog into a constant headwind, which one are you going to choose? I already know, but you got to give me your answer, buddy.
It's a very hard choice, but I think I would climb a hill for a month over 5 minutes in those headwinds.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God, Team Hill Climb. You can be the Team Hill Climb captain. I've recently just done a poll on the Seek Travel Ride Facebook group of this question. I'm about to wrap up the first year of the podcast, and I'm contemplating whether I'll change up what my last two questions will be when I move into season 2. But I thought I'll ask fans of the show, and at the moment, I think it's 3% of people, which is actually just one person so far, and the overwhelming majority have chosen the headwinds. Shout out to you, Tom. But yeah, like, hill climbs are winning over and above. I honestly thought when I started asking this question, there'd be more flatlanders amongst my guests who would be fine to battle into a headwind. Maybe I need to interview some more Dutch guests.
Yeah, maybe.
I feel though, Jack, even if you hadn't had that headwind experience in the Arizona desert there, I feel as a filmmaker, the hills are where the magic happens in the scenery too. I feel like that was probably always going to be your choice, man.
Yeah, Yeah, it's like you got to grind to get that reward at the bottom or at the top.
Alrighty, Jack, we're near the end now. Final question. One day you're given a choice. You're only riding the bike for 4 hours on this day. Not a long time at all, but it's 4 hours of bike riding. You can choose to do it on your own or with other people. Which one are you going to choose?
On my own. I like the struggle. I like not having to like work to other people's schedules. So I think on my own would be the choice.
Can I ask, would that be different if you were hiking or not at all?
I think alone still a little bit, but hiking definitely I would be more open to spending time with people for sure. Riding, I feel like I'm in a suffer hole, and I don't want to have to other people to deal with that or me to deal with other people in that state. Whereas hiking, it felt more of a social experience and something that was like better shared.
I wonder also, hiking is like slow travel really taken down to its slowest form too. So I guess unless you're swimming. But
Yeah.
I wonder whether it's, you're so in the moment, you're there and it's so slow. Maybe the thirst for company is maybe a bit more present there. Maybe not too. It's a hypothesis of mine. Wow, what an experience. Oh, Jack, we're winding up the show here. I gave a shout out to your channel. So Jack Keogh, it's your YouTube channel there. How else can people keep up with your adventures? Have you got other social media websites or anything like that you want to plug? I'll stick them in the show notes for our listeners.
You can catch me on Instagram. That's probably the best place to contact me if you have questions. That's the same, just Jack Scott Keogh. And my website is jackscottkeogh.com.
Easy. I will include links to that in the show notes. And I know I've probably said this a million times already, but hey, if you're a fan for this type of content, hit up YouTube today. As soon as you've listened to this show, watch Jack's films, whether it's the Tour Divide or whether it's the one on the Pacific Crest Trail. Both of them will give you such a wanderlust for adventure. Jack Keogh, it has been an absolute pleasure to share time with you, to chat with you today, and to listen to you share your experiences of adventures. May there be many, many more adventures ahead of you. One day I hope to ride bikes with you, share a beer or something. Thank you so, so much for sharing your story and experiences here for Seek Travel Ride.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you feel as energized as I do after listening to Jack there share his stories and his experiences, not just from the Tour Divide, but also the Pacific Crest Trail, how having adventures in a slow travel way has really, I guess, shaped him into who he is at the moment, but also just how energizing it can be to be in those big landscapes and take these challenges, these long distance challenges. Perhaps it sparked a thought in your mind to take one on for yourself. If you're enjoying listening to the show, why not get involved in our Seek Travel Ride community? We have a group there on Facebook under Seek Travel Ride. There is a link to it in the show notes. Join the group, join the discussion. Many guests of the show are actually in that group as well. So it's an opportunity to interact with them as well and get involved in some more of the details behind our stories here for each episode. If you'd like to get in touch with me and share your own experience from an adventure that you have taken or are currently undertaking, you can do that by sending me an email. My email address is podcast@seektravelride.com. Send me an email. Let me know about all your adventures. And even if you're just an avid listener to the show, let me know. I always love hearing from you. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.